Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us this afternoon to stay curious. Today, we're going to kick off May 1st, 2024, with an overview, real quickly, of the 10 amazing, beautiful space shuttles in the month of May. Just 3 of the 5 orbiters flew in the month of May, but the 10 missions all have a lot of interesting uh, goals, including 5 hard hat missions to this guy right here, the International Space Station, which was pretty much in its infancy when these missions in May flew up there. So glad that you're all with us today, spending your time to get a little space history like no one else does. That's the pride of the American Space Museum, is celebrating the birth of the American space age right here where it all began in Brevard County, and specifically Merritt Island and Cape Canaveral, which I'm just sitting about 10 miles away from the launch pad that has the first Atlas rocket to send humans to space since the last century. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in just a second. But we want to make sure everybody has got their cards ready to spend some money Saturday for our charity auction, the 37th auction that Mr. Chuck Jeffrey and his Bid Again Auctions Company has done for the American Space Museum. Chuck, of course, a premier collector out there who's turned his passion into helping the American Space Museum sustain itself. And that's what we do with these auctions. They're so important for some of our everyday operating capital. So go check it out. You can bid right now. It's a very rich auction with a lot of what we call flatware, uh, photographs, posters, 11 by 14s, 8 by 10s that come out of the laboratory of Johnson Space Center or the Hubble Institute in Baltimore, Maryland, or even Jet Propulsion Lab, as there's a lot of beautiful pictures that you can own, from their Surveyor spacecraft that landed on the moon to the Viking orbiters and landers on Mars, and a lot of Hubble original, not lithographs, but photographs that you can buy. And NASA imagery particularly this century has become artwork, and it's well established now among art directors that will decorate offices and homes, that a piece of space art is something desirable to have. So whether it be the Earthrise over the moon, I saw one of those 11 by 14s in there that should go for, boy, $400 or $500 easy, to Buzz Aldrin standing beside the lunar module leg there on Apollo 11, 54 years ago we're talking about now. So yes, we're coming up on the 55th anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing in July. Those Apollo original photographs, some of them have the numbers and letters on them that mean they were kind of an internal VIP print for NASA VIPs and executives and other people that they wanted to share with. So those can go for $300 to $400 to $500. So, but there'll be a lot of prints out there that you can get in the $50 range or so, and every penny helps the American Space Museum somehow. So check it out. We'll be talking about it and go over it in detail on Friday, but you can pre-bid now. Let's say you want to go up to $400 for that one of these pictures of Buzz Aldrin there on Apollo 11. If the bidding only goes up to $275, you would get it at the next level, $300. But you put the most that you're willing to spend up there, do it now and check it out. Well, always love talking about the great James Webb. He was the architect, really, financially, with Congress, of getting this to the moon, the second NASA administrator. And on this date, May 1st, 1961, just 2 years after the Mercury astronauts began their training, and we were talking about that this week, that this is the first week for the Mercury 7 to report for work there at the Hangar S at Cape Canaveral Space Force. Well, Webb on May 1st issued a statement regarding the progress of the Mercury manned spaceflight program, and he had this to say: NASA has not attempted to encourage press coverage of the first Mercury Redstone manned flight. It has responded to press and television requests with the result that over 100 representatives of the press, radio, and TV are now at Cape Canaveral. And that, of course, would be for the historic launch on May 5th of Alan Shepard coming up, the suborbital flight. We must keep the perspective, says the great James Webb, that each flight is but one of many milestones we must pass. Some will completely succeed in every aspect, some partially, and some will fail. From all of them will come mastery of the vast new space environment on which so much of our future depends. And a great statement of where the program is and going and preparing the American public for whatever lies ahead. Here he is with the lunar module by Grumman in one hand there. We have a larger scale model of that in our Apollo gallery, and that is a lunar orbiter that was so important on mapping the moon and figuring out where we were going to land. Webb was a NASA administrator for 8 years during the until President Nixon's administration won in 1968, and of course he was replaced then. But this is why the James Webb Telescope is named after this man. He revolutionized man's space exploration, just like the Webb Telescope is revolutionizing astronomy right now. And the first true space bureaucrat, and the finest that we had, Mr. James Webb. Well, there is Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmer. Sonny's the pilot, Butch is the commander of this important flight Monday, 10:34 p.m. the liftoff on Pad 41. And this is, I've been talking about that the Butch and Sonny have not flown in over a decade, all right? And I thought that was a misuse of their skills. And this woman at lunch today, Kay Heyer, certainly straightened me out, because I'm privileged to be at a luncheon of some retired NASA executives and public relations people that Mr. Hugh Harris, who passed away, invited me to, and Lisa Malone, his right-hand person, has continued the tradition. And Kay splits her time between Houston and Merritt Island, and shows up. She shows up 3 or 4 times a year at this monthly luncheon, and she was there today. And I said, Kay, is it a misuse of these 2 astronauts to not have gone to space in over a decade? And Kay jumped right on me and said, Mark, no, they are test pilots. This is what they do. They have been working their asses off for the last 10 years, getting this Boeing Starliner in shape. All right, now they were part of the commercial crew that was announced. They weren't the original crew that was chosen to fly this, as Boeing had different hurdles to cross and some outright problems. But after an unmanned successful flight, they're going to send 2 people up Monday night. Kay's in town to bid them adieu and support them. And here's the Atlas V rocket out at the launch pad. And the last time an Atlas rocket put humans into space was 1963, and that had been Gordon Cooper's space flight. The last Mercury astronaut to fly, stayed up there for a little over a day, even took a nap up there. But there's the Starliner on top of an Atlas V rocket. It's got a little special configuration of booster rockets on the side. And this is very historic, because the Atlas rocket was the workhorse out there at Pad 36 for General Dynamics, and 350 satellites were put in space. That means there's over 350 carcasses of an Atlas laying in the Atlantic Ocean somewhere off our coast. But so it's exciting that in almost 60 years, all right, an Atlas rocket's not been used to put humans in space, and here United Launch Alliance's Atlas V, which is souped up a little bit for the crewed launch, will put this Starliner in orbit. They will dock with the International Space Station about a day later, and then spend 10 days up there. And I said, Kay, I'm going to be leading my show off today with you straightening me out. Thank you very much. But she's very adamant that Suni she corrects me. She's called Sunny. A lot of us say Suni, but it is Sunny Williams. And Butch Wilmer are the right people at the right time. They have really been sticklers for getting this spacecraft human rated, and they will do so when they're launched on Monday. So we're looking forward to that. That'll be big news over the weekend. So all of us on Merritt Island, you might see Kay filling up her little sports car at a gas station. There'll be a lot of astronauts on around the county this weekend, as they will be here to support Sonny and Butch on this daring flight to the maiden flight, which Kay kept saying this is no different than STS-1 and the bravery of John Young and Bob Crippen. They did not have an experimental unmanned flight before the first shuttle, STS-1, on April 12th, 1981. But Kay points out this is just as daring and filled with just as many boxes to check off as unknowns as the first shuttle flight, as well as the first SpaceX Crew Dragon flight that had her crewmate Bob Behnken on it on her 90 STS mission 130 that put the cupola up on the space station on her patch there. So always great to see you, Kay. Thanks for straightening me out, and you can do it anytime. I should have took a picture of her pulling on my ear, slapping my forehead or something on there. But I'm really not like that. I don't get too many pictures with astronauts I'm with, and the autographs I get for the museums. So it's part of the job. Great. And I am blessed to be doing that. Well, we love looking at the rearview mirror at our wonderful space shuttle era, last flown in 2011, but still affecting our lives as the 21st century is one quarter over, folks. So we're going to talk about real quickly the 10 shuttles of the month of May. We had orbiters Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavour fly. In fact, Discovery flew 5 times in the month of May. That's what I have the little A, E, and D for on there. Endeavour, no, I take that back. It had been Atlantis that flew 5 times. STS OV-103's Discovery, it flew twice. OV-104, Atlantis flew 5 times. It is beautifully displayed here at Kennedy Space Center. And then Endeavour, that's being erected out there in a full stack in Los Angeles, flew 3 times. 65 tickets were punched, we call it. So 65 seats were filled in these 10 missions, but there were 5 repeats, and we can pick them out maybe as we go through here, some of the crews of who repeated in the month, and I'll tell you about them later. We've got all month to talk about it. 11 women, 54 men of the 55 humans, and 5 of them punched tickets twice, of course, years apart. Of these 10 flights, 6 of them had a full crew of 7. 3 of them had 6 crew members, and 1 of them had 5 crew members on it. And the first and last flight, the maiden and ultimate flight of Endeavour, were flown in the month of May. That's STS-48 there and STS-134, flown 9 years apart. And then you had 5 hard hat missions to the International Space Station, 2 of them in its infancy, and then 1 to the Mir space station of Russia, in that cooperation with them, and the first interplanetary mission was flown in the month of May. So let's kick that off. I got Selvin Trotter on the board here. Didn't say hi to Selvin. Marty, again, taking another personal day off. Good to see you, Selvin. Doing a flawless job as usual here.
Good to be here.
And let's first look at a couple of these missions. I'll go over some of these patches later. You know I like doing that. But here is the 1-5 crew mission of Atlantis with the Magellan spacecraft, the first interplanetary probe in the cargo bay of the shuttle. And it was released, and then it had a motor on it that sent it on its way. After orbiting Earth and getting the gravity assist, it went to the planet Venus. And this was very important because Venus is enshrouded in clouds. Okay, there's the crew that flew there. Dave Walker was the commander. Ron Grabe was the pilot. You had Norm Thagard, Mary Cleve, and Mark Lee on this mission. So we've seen Mark Lee a lot out there at the Space Center. Also, Norm Thagard is out there 2 or 3 times a year. Never asked Norm about the Magellan mission there, but I believe this was his second mission after flying with Sally Ride in STS-7. Uh, but this was an important spacecraft that you see in the picture there. Kind of unusual picture, too, where they put the props up on a cloth-covered prop holder there. This is what Venus looks like with ultraviolet light. It's completely enshrouded in a thick layer of clouds. 30 miles thick is this cloud layer, where the cloud layer on Earth is just a couple miles. And we can't see the surface. That's why it's so bright. And Venus is in the morning sky right now. You early risers will see Venus will pop into your eyes up there. And Saturn and Mars are also in the twilight. I think Venus has gotten too close to the sun as I think about it, and is about to pop up in the evening sky this summer. So, but what Magellan did was Earth is considered the twin of Venus, slightly smaller as Venus, but it is a hellish world where it's 900 degrees on the surface because of a runaway greenhouse effect. But there's dozens of volcanoes on Venus, and we now know some of them are active. And this is the typical global shot that Magellan took, all pieced together from hundreds of photos of the surface of Venus. It has some high areas, but not like the Earth, and not many depressions either. But there's our luscious planet Earth, and compared to the hellish twin of Venus. So we learned a lot about Venus that is still common knowledge today, though this mission was flown in 1989. So we're almost 35 years away from the data of this, but it is still valuable today in the bedrock for science about Venus. Well, the next flight in not numerical order, but in their launch of the month, launched on the 7th day of May, was STS-49. And I kind of made notes about what do I think about and what should you think about, space geeks, when you think of these missions here. And, well, Endeavour is named after the English ship Endeavour. That's why you have an OUR, one of the most famous of the science ships and investigative ships that Britain had around the world. Endeavour had Dan Brandenstein, Kevin Shilton as the pilot and commander. Brandenstein, the commander, he became the chief of the astronaut office. You have Peter Thoet, Kathy Thornton, Richard Heeb, Tom Akers, and our friend Bruce Melnick on this mission. And of course, what you should think about, two things. One, the flags have something to do with the two schools that named Endeavour. This was the replacement ship for Challenger. We'll talk about that at another Stay Curious next week when we highlight this mission. But this is the only three-person spacewalk by Akers, Heeb, and Thoet. All right. Now, Kathy Thornton, she was qualified to be a spacewalker, but she didn't participate in this one. This was the capture of a satellite that did not get to orbit on a previous mission. So he said, let's go up and rescue it. We're going to deploy a couple satellites, and we're going to rescue this Intelsat 5. And the way they figured out, they were going to grab it with the robotic arm, and it was moving too much. So they said, I'll tell you what, we can get 3 people out there. And this was a very daring maneuver. You're familiar with that picture, and not so much this one. But they really had to coordinate with each other, hand signals and by vocal signals. Now, grab it now. They stopped it. They anchored it down there. And this was a really hairy, unscripted in spacewalks that they performed event. I think this was Dan Golden was the NASA administrator, and this was his first flight, and he certainly wanted it to be a good one. And I don't think, well, Melnick said he wasn't too pleased that they wanted to do something outside the box like a 3-person EVA, but nonetheless, they pulled it off and did well. Also, you should think of STS-49 as being the first shuttle to have a drogue chute slow it down on the runway as it deployed here. They were burning up the brakes really bad, trying to stop this 20-ton spacecraft when it landed at 200 miles an hour. And so they thought, well, let's put, like we do on some aircraft, on aircraft carriers and so forth, let's put a parachute on to slow it down. So STS-49, the only 3-person EVA ever in the history of space so far, and the drogue chute was used for the first time in 1992. Well, you all know what this means looking at this iconic patch, the last Hubble upgrade mission that we hope to make a centerpiece of at Shuttle Fest next April. Of course, you had the commander was, of course, the commander was Altman. Why don't they have Altman's name on here? Oh, that's interesting. Scott Altman was the commander, and Box Johnson was the pilot. And you had Grunsfeld, Feutzel, Good and Massimino were the spacewalkers, and Megan MacArthur, still an active astronaut. She was the last person to touch the Hubble with the robotic arm. So this is the last time that humans have looked at the Hubble with their own eyes, and this was in 2009. Okay, and so that's 15 years ago. The flight was launched on May 11th, so we'll talk a lot about that. As the Hubble has in the news, one of the gyroscopes, 3 of the gyroscopes that they have on there, and were replaced 11 years or 15 years ago, is out of whack and not working. They're trying to work it up to where they can it be usable, but it can work with just 3 gyroscopes. That's how they point the telescope. There was no fuel reaction control thrusters on the Hubble because they didn't want that gas getting onto the lens, onto the mirror, and the lens parts inside. See, it's covered there with a barn door. That's the Earth reflecting in it as the sun comes behind the new set of solar panels that they put on. And so no one's looked at this to see those solar panels in 15 years. There are some private companies like Jared Isaacman, the billionaire that has his own company, did the St. Jude's flight in a Crew Dragon. He's thinking about trying to bring the Hubble back. He's actually got a plan for that. Maybe Blue Origin or SpaceX will want to bring it back. When I mean bring it back, bring it to where they can service it again and keep it up there. It'll never be brought back. You need a big space shuttle again, cargo bay, to get it through reentry. But we can certainly keep upgrading it. Though it was planned to last 10 years, it's in its 34th year right now. So an amazing piece of science. One of the amazing things the Hubble showed us in 1999, 5 years after, 94, all right, deployed in 1990. In 1994, we saw for the first time a comet hit a planet, and that's the black scar marks that the Hubble took of comet Shoemaker-Levy 9, and it's 20-some pieces hitting the atmosphere of Jupiter. The first time we'd ever visualized interplanetary material hitting any object in the solar system, though we think we may have gotten a picture or two in backyard observatories of a meteor hitting the moon. So just an amazing machine. We keep it going. Well, let's go chug along here with our 4th shuttle of the month of May is STS-32, launched May 14th, 2010. And this was the Dexter mission. This was a great hard hat mission. You had the astronauts, had Steve Bowen, Reisman, Ham, and Antonelli, the pilot and co-pilot, or commander and co-commander. We met Antonelli a few times. He's a good guy. Astronaut Good and Sellers, and they did EVAs, and they took up with them this little guy called Dexter. You can see it looks like a stick figure of a robotic man, and that's what it is. It is a robot that they use on the space station to move things around that they don't need humans to twist the screws off of, and clamps and cables and so forth. So, and I've not read a whole lot about how Dexter's played into the whole scenario here in the last 5 or 10 years, but it was big news in 2010 when they orbited this little robot was taken to space by STS-132. And then we had the 5th docking with the Mir space station. 6th docking, correct me. Launched May 15th, STS-84. Had Charlie Precourt as the commander and Eileen Collins as the pilot. I think Eileen also piloted the first fly around of the shuttle a couple years earlier. Mike Foale, Carlos Noriega, Ed Lu, Jean-Francois Clairvoy, and Russian cosmonaut Elena Kondakova. And she may have been the last, no, she's not the last Russian to go to space, but next to last. She was married to a Russian cosmonaut also. So they transferred all kinds of things to the Mir space station anytime that the shuttle docked with the Mir. I think we did it 7 times. It was a big house cleaning, so to speak. Get some fresh air. Opening up the windows on a spring day is what the equivalent of the shuttle docking with the Mir was to give them a bunch of fresh air. And this in 1997 was really solidifying the Russian-American relationship that still continues today, despite the tensions in the Ukraine war. We still have cosmonauts working with Americans on the International Space Station. And there is the incredible shot of the shuttle and the Mir docked together. Never again to be seen. The Mir is at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, or Indian Ocean, I believe, most of it, when it was deorbited. And of course, the space shuttle, the 3 remaining ones are now museum artifacts. Well, STS-134 was going to be the last mission of the space shuttle. And there's even posters and T-shirts printed up that have just 134 in the program. It was actually lobbied by Congress that everything was to Congress that everything was ready to go for the last mission 135, and so they took 4 astronauts up in July 2011, and just cram-packed that lower bay with all kinds of equipment and food and clothing and stuff for the space station. But this was a science mission to take up a very interesting piece of scientific equipment called the alpha magnetic spectrometer, and that's what this whole patch is all about. All right. The alpha magnetic spectrometer shown here was a $1 billion instrument that was so important for astronomers to analyze cosmic ray events, all right, and try to identify antimatter and dark matter. And already your eyes are glazing over, but researchers found that high energy positrons and cosmic ray electrons come from different and mysterious sources in our solar system, our universe, mostly from black hole energy that's spewed across the universe. But this alpha magnetic spectrometer is helping solve cosmic rays and antimatter, and increases our understanding of the universe. So it's been permanently attached to the International Space Station. There was a spacewalk a year ago to upgrade some of the instruments on it, but it's basically a gigantic magnet, for better terminology, that cosmic rays are captured in. What are cosmic rays? Well, when the astronauts would sleep and close their eyes, they would see flashes of light going through their retinas. They could actually see streaks of light like meteors as they close their eyes. That's cosmic rays going through your body. The Earth's atmosphere stops most of them from hitting the surface. But where these cosmic rays come from, it's cosmic. That's why they're called that. But we do understand now that black holes and the horrific amount of energy that they produce as stars collapse into gravity holes is another thing. Are they harmful? Will they hurt us on the way to Mars and beyond? possibly, and that's what this instrument's all about. Well, let's see. We've got now our seventh space shuttle of the month is launched on the 19th of the month in 1996, STS-77. All right, and it's one of my favorite crew photographs because they're definitely Trekkie and not Star Wars characters there. Left to right, you've got, well, the commander's seated. There's John Casper. Kurt Brown is where's Kurt Brown? He's on the upper left, I think. He's the pilot. Dan Bursch, Mario Runco. Mario Runco's doing the Vulcan sign there with the Vulcan ears. If you met Mario recently, he's got hair down the middle of his back, and he's a big outreach guy. Mark Garneau, Canadian astronaut, and Andy Thomas are among the astronauts here. So anyway, that's their Star Trek version there. And what was the mission? Well, Space Hab. I think Space Hab flew 30 times. This Space Hab is different from Space Lab. Okay, Space Hab was shorter. It met its demise in the Columbia disaster. So it was a shorter version of a laboratory where they could get in and do different scientific things on there. They did things like the Brilliant Eyes 10 Kelvin Sorption Psycho Cooler Experiment, an experiment designed to supercool infrared and other sensors through cyclic release and absorption of hydrogen. And there was big joint experiments with the Canadian Space Agency, and they did a lot of biological functions on starfish, mussels, sea urchins, particularly their reproduction processes. They had a couple experiments that they floated around here on the arm, I believe is the Spartan 207 Free Flyer. So a very ambitious mission that lasted 10 days in Discovery in 1996 in the month of May. The 8th mission of May is Atlantis, the 3rd International Space Station flight, 24 years ago. All right. Jim Halsell was the pilot. Jim Halsell was the commander. Scott Horowitz, the pilot. You had Jeffrey Williams, Jim Voss, Susan Helms, and Yuri Yusevich on board. So Susan Helms, this is her second flight in the month of May. I recognize her name coming up twice there. But what did the space station look like? What did they do? Well, here's Jim Voss carrying something that looks like a big bolt that is part of the infant International Space Station that in 1996 looked like this in an artist concept of the Discovery being docked with it. So this is Atlantis Mission 101. This actually depicts the STS-96 mission in 1999. So they just gotten Zarya and the Russian segment and the American segment Destiny are the two main modules there, and solar panels on it, and very primitive time. And that's why we get up to STS. Then in a year earlier, this crew of Kent Rominger, and Rick Husband. Of course, Rick Husband lost his life in Columbia, but he was the pilot of this mission, STS-96 in 1999. Ellen Ochoa, Tammy Jernigan, Dan Barry, Julie Payette, one of our favorites, and another Russian, Valery Tokarov, were on board this mission. And it was, again, a hard hat mission to the International Space Station. 10 days, doing some joining Unity with Zarya modules, okay? And like I said, it looked very, very similar to this in 1999. So the first mission that actually before this was Bob Cabana's flight, where they turned on the lights inside the two modules. And this was the gorgeous launch of Discovery. Some of you space workers remember STS-96 being a early morning launch at 6:49 a.m. And that had to be a gorgeous, gorgeous sight as you saw it roar off the pad for a 9-day mission. And finally, in the month of May, the STS-24 flight launched on May 31st, just snuck in there, okay, in 1908. This took up the Japanese Kibo, all right, observatory up there, and had Karan Nyberg on there, Garrett Reisman, Mark Kelly was the commander, Gregory Chamitoff, and Ken Ham was the pilot on the thing. Astronaut Hoshidi, who I met, really a great guy. Ron Guerin and Mike Folsom on that flight there. So what a great mission. This was the true partnership of Japan. As you see the Kibo module there with the red sun of Japan on it. Their very stylized patch here. And this is the Kibo module right there. Wait, I wanted to show you first this launch on May 31st at 5 in the afternoon had a lot of damage to the pad. These are bricks that were thrown out of the flame trench of the SSME engines when they took off. And I've heard some workers talk about that. It beat up that fence pretty bad on there. And so some of them had souvenir bricks to take home. There is the Kibo module there with the Japan rising sun on it, attached to ESA's Columbus module there. And this end to the left here, later they put on a porch, and see the robotic arms attached there. They can pick up things on that robotic porch and bring them inside and outside through an airlock on the Kibo module there. So great partners, Japan, the JAXA Space Agency, with all their commitments to the International Space Station, even beyond the predicted life of the space station, which is now around 2030 on there. So there we have our beautiful space station like I have it on the green screen here behind us today. Hope that you've enjoyed this look at the 10 beautiful space shuttles of the month of May that here 25 years almost into the 21st century, what this shuttle did still lives on in everyday conveniences, everyday communication, and everyday science that is helping humans on Earth. And just to throw out there, they've yet to take a spacecraft and stuff it full of $100 bills and orbit the Earth. Every dollar that was spent to build this has been spent here on the Earth. And there is that thin blue line that our astronaut friend Nicole Stott in her beautiful book reminds us that, one, we're all crewmates on this spaceship Earth. We are all, the only border that matters is that thin blue line right there, and look how thin it is. So thank you all for watching today. Thank you, Selvin, for a good program. Do we have any comments from anybody today?
A few. CB Spock said he got to meet Julie Pay at a astronaut encounter at KSC.
Julie's one of our favorites out there, and her flight on STS-96. I've never really heard her talk about it. Next time she comes, I'm going to ask her. I didn't realize she was at the infancy of the International Space Station, and then she got to ride up there when it was almost done. So, good. All right, Selvin. All right, thanks.
All right, guys.
Thank you very much. Tomorrow we're going to try to get a guest or two in here yet this week. Mike Mungo's one that a great educator and also involved with Yuri's Night here at the Space Coast. So, but we're efforting a lot of interviews, getting them lined up for the month of May. And there you have our 10 shuttles of the month of May. And don't forget to remind you to bid till it hurts Saturday, as our charity auction needs your support to keep our doors open. This is a big part of our general operating funds here. So check out these beautiful photographs. Buy one, get it framed, put it on your wall, and have everyone that visits your house look at it in awe. So until tomorrow, I'm Marquette saying I can't wait to see you in our museum.